Hey everyone, Brandon with Flyin Miata back for yet another FM Live. And today we're going to talk about data, how to get it, what to do with it, how to see it, and what it means via the bank's iDash, which has been around for a while, but there's some new stuff. And we also kind of want to go over some of the more in-depth stuff that you can do with it. Now, as always, you have questions, drop them in the comments. We'll try to get to them live. If we don't, we'll get to them after the fact. That said, what is an iDash? So an iDash is this tiny little gauge here. So this is an OBDII scanner. Can be a data logger. It has a ton of capability in there. So now it is OBDII. That is only for NC and ND. The NAs and NBs are a basic rudimentary enough OBDII stream that it can't really do anything. You might get one or two things out of it, but not much. That doesn't mean it doesn't work for NAs and NBs, but there is an asterisk on that, and I'll talk about that later. Now, this is a standard in our world gauge size, 52 millimeters, 2 inches, 2 1/16 inches. Now, again, it is OBDII. It plugs straight into your OBDII port. It has a nice right angle plug, so very low profile. It's not really going to be in your way. Easy peasy. It also has a very flat cord, so in that direction, wider in that direction. So, so it's easy to route around interior stuff. We also have a suction cup gauge in this car. You can kind of sort of see, gauge pod, which actually works really, really well. It sounds kind of weird, but if you fold it around in just the right way, it really mounts nicely. It's a very clean, discreet look to it. And you can see some of the wires running in there too. Okay, so since this is OBDII, it can check and clear codes. It will tell you if you have a check engine light. It will tell you what that code is, and it will give you the ability to clear it. Now, it can show, and if you have the data logging version log, a lot of different parameters. On this car, it's 35 different parameters. On an ND1, I know we have one here somewhere. It's 40 parameters, and on an ND2, it's 55, and we haven't checked on an ND3. My guess is it's even more. But basically, it can log and show a ton of different parameters. It can also show you or you can set it up so that it has different screens. You can set up to 5 custom screens, and each screen can have anywhere from 2 to 8 parameters on it, all being displayed at the same time. So it's very flexible in terms of what you want to do. You can also, have a general street one where it's just 2 parameters, and then a track one where you have more parameters, or maybe vice versa because you don't have as much time for your eyeballs to see things. Along those lines, you can also set up warnings. So you can say, if the coolant temp gets over this temperature, tell me about it, and it will throw basically a yellow icon up on the screen to make it big and obvious and say, hey, you have a problem, you should probably pay attention. You can also add a lot of external sensors, and that's going to be a large portion of what we're going to talk about today, but in a minute. So again, there are 2 different versions of this. There's kind of the basic one that does not log anything. Now, you can set min-max values, so it will say your coolant temp got up to this. This was the highest temp for your coolant, this was the lowest temp for your coolant. It will not say this is the curve of your coolant the whole way, unless you have the logging version. And you can do that for 20 different values, and you choose which values are logged for min-max. Yes, I think that's it. But wait, there's more. I lied. So there is now a new version of the iDash. Now, we don't have it yet. It will be here shortly. But it's very similar, but it's basically just better and more modern. So it has a higher resolution on the screen. It's a better viewing angle, better contrast. Really, it's easier to see is kind of the short version there. It has a faster processor and more memory. And the data logging is 25% faster as well. So you can get a little more resolution to your data. It also, as with nearly everything, has a phone app. So you can Bluetooth your phone into the gauge, and you can set it up more easily that way. It's honestly, it's really not that hard to use the buttons, but it's easier on the phone. Excuse me. But it's also very nice because if there's an update for it, your app will update, you connect your phone to your gauge, and then you can update it that way. So over-the-air updates are much, much easier with the new version than with the old version. And one of the things, for me, the thing that I'm most excited about is that the new version is going to have the ability to take 6 external sensors. Now, the old one did as well, but you had to have these piggyback modules. And with these modules, man, you could add basically anything. That you can stack these things very, very deep. It is impressive. You can still do that with the new one, but for your first 6 inputs, I think 4 analog and 2 digital, you don't have to because that's already built into the gauge. Now that is upcoming. That doesn't exist on the gauges yet, but that is a firmware kind of thing, so it will be updated when you attach your phone to it in the future. Again, we don't have the new version yet, but we will soon. Now that said, we do have the old version on the shelf still. The old version is less expensive than the new version. So if you don't need the data logging, or really more than that, if you don't need the external sensors, then save yourself some money and grab the old one. If you do need the external sensors, you can do it with these. Probably best off to wait until the new one is here, which will not be too long. Now, let's show you what the fancy screen or what the old screen does, because we still have the old ones in our car here. So this is Nancy. Everybody say hi to Nancy. This is our NC Turbo development car. Any fans, subscribers, like you should all do, of the channel, will probably be very familiar with this car. It's been here for a while. So, excuse me, you can see the way we have these are just the screens that we have set up. So you can see there's our manifold pressure, there's our engine coolant temp, and there's our catalytic converter temp. So, and you hold it down for a minute and it changes. Now we've removed a number of sensors from this car. Here's coolant temp again. Here's the engine oil temp, which I thought we still had in this car. We did under hood ambient temperature next to the brake lines to make sure that was safe. So we labeled that. You know, they don't have a preset for that, so we changed that, changed that name ourselves. So you can go through a bunch of this other stuff, and I'll talk about what we did there. So you can choose the gauge layout here. I'm not going to go into all the specifics, but you choose the number of gauges. You choose what you want in each field here. Data logging is here because this is the data logging version. Diagnostics, we can get into the OBDII system right there. Set up alerts, like I said, warnings. You know, if it gets too hot, if my coolant temp gets over X, then tell me about it, that kind of thing. Min-max log, again, you set the values. Excuse me. I want to know what my max ambient temperature was. I want to know what my charge air cooler temperature was, my battery voltage, you know, that kind of thing. It's going to log all of that right here, and you can set those parameters right there. So this is not a how-to, this is just kind of a general overall overview. Shift light is exactly what it sounds like. Banks modules are that black box that with all the external sensors that are in there. Settings, system information. You can do a firmware update with a micro SD card on the old versions. So you can do it, it's just clunkier, and it's kind of the old version at this point. So that is it. Do we have any questions, anything specific that anyone wants to see? Okay. So now these are some of the sensors that we used in the development of this turbo kit, and we logged it all through the iDash. Now the iDash has, again, OBDII, so you can plug into the OBDII stream. It can log any of that data that you want. You specify which parameters you want logged, it will log those. You can also add a bunch of different things to it. So we used all of these sensors. We've got pressure sensor, air temp sensor. This is a pressure sensor hooked up to a braided line, so it can give us exhaust pressure. This is EGT, so exhaust gas temperature that goes in the exhaust stream. And then this is a little piece that we made specifically to measure the temperature and pressure behind the air filter. So I'll kind of walk through that on the car here. Now at this point, we've removed a lot of the sensors from this car, so you're not going to see them on there. Honestly, you would probably only see the two here anyway, because the rest of them are buried in there. But what we had pressure and temperature here. So the pressure is going to tell us if we have undue restriction in our intake setup, and the temperature is going to tell us how well the temperature is doing compared to ambient. We want the intake air temp to be as close to ambient as possible. And actually that sensor is why this has a lid, because it was quite hot without it. Now it does have what they call the air mouse. It's basically a weather station that we've mounted in the nose. So that gives you your ambient air temperature, your humidity, I think other stuff too, I can't remember. So basically it's like a weather station, and that allows you to correlate everything. You know, okay, my temp here is 100 degrees. That's pretty warm. Oh, well, it's 100 degrees outside, so that makes sense, that kind of thing. So we had pressure and temperature on both sides of the intercooler. Now that's going to tell us whether the intercooler has too much restriction, whether the intercooler is working well for the temperature delta or difference between the inlet and the outlet. So that's there. On the exhaust side, we had pressure and temperature on both sides of the turbo. Again, that's going to tell us how healthy the engine is, how healthy the tuning is, whether the exhaust flow is good or whether the pressure is too high, and especially the delta, the pressure difference between the exhaust coming into the turbo and the exhaust going out of the turbo. One of the other big things is that we put one of those EGT probes, exhaust gas temperature, in the catalytic converter itself, so we can make sure that it came up to temp fast enough for clean emissions. It maintained that temperature as it should, and it doesn't over temp so that it stays healthy and long-lived. So that all worked really well. And then we also took advantage of the sensors that were in the car to start off with. There's a manifold absolute pressure sensor on the back of the manifold, which actually we changed to deal with the boost, but regardless, that comes in through the OBDII stream. The mass airflow sensor here, that tells us how much air is going into the engine, and as well as the temperature, because there's a temp sensor in here. Coolant temp, we also put an oil temp in the pan so that we can make sure that that is staying safe as well. So all that kind of stuff. Any questions? Yes, there is a question.
I have a Sakura-themed Miata, and I want pink. Can I get pink?
I have I'm not going to try to pronounce that word, themed Miata, and I want pink. It depends on your definition. You can change the color of the display. You cannot change, well, yeah, sure, you can change the color of this. Go to your friendly department store, Walmart, Target, and get a can of spray paint. No, seriously.
The LCD.
Yeah, the LCD does come in different colors, or is programmable to different colors. We can look at that real quick. I will admit that that is not real high on my priority list, so I don't know how to do it, but I do know that it is possible. And you can see it, maybe. So this is keyed. Your OBDII port always has power. So this is smart enough to not wake up until it sees an RPM signal. That's why I have to push the button to get it to wake up, since the engine is not running. So you can see this one is blue. This one is also blue. That was a disappointing change. This one is green. You see how the color, or excuse me, the button arrow colors changed as well. Let's see what other colors we have preset. So white arrows, red screen, pink-ish. That's kind of pink. And we're back to blue. And I'm gonna guess, no, that's not it. Maybe I won't waste everyone's time on trying to figure out how to change the colors, but it's possible. It's in there somewhere. Oop. Okay, more questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Goodness, lots of them coming in. Asking about if you were to put this on an NB, can you pull accurate oil pressure information?
Okay. So if I put this on an NB, can I pull accurate oil pressure information? Yes, big ol' asterisk. So your car does not have a real oil pressure sensor on it to start off with. It just says, I have no pressure, or actually, let me rephrase. The oil pressure is greater or less than 9 PSI, I think. That is all that physical part, the sensor itself on the car, tells anything. I do not think that information goes into the ECU, so it couldn't be pulled out anyway. But if it could, which I don't think it can, it would just say yes or no. That said, if you set it up with an external sensor and put a real sensor on it, this will take that information and relay it to you. So it will not pull it out of the OBD2 stream, but it is possible if you add the sensors. So again, with a situation like that, you can absolutely do it with this kind of setup with the old style. It's going to be more expensive. If you don't need a ton of different sensors, excuse me, let me rephrase. If you need any external sensors, I would wait for the new version. That's going to be a much more cost-effective way to do it. Yes?
I have an NA-NB with a standalone that uses CAN bus.
Ooh.
Will this output CAN bus to an aftermarket ECU? So that way you can display or feed information to my ECU.
Okay, so I have an aftermarket ECU, runs on CAN bus. Will this thing output CAN bus to that ECU? I don't know what it would output to the ECU. Generally, it runs in the other direction. So the ECU is going to feed information into a thing that you can read. If that was the intent of the question, that's a good one, and I don't know. My confidence level is not super high because it would have to be a standard language, and this is built around, big market stuff, which is going to be OBDII. So maybe, but probably not. This probably won't display the information that your ECU is putting onto the CAN bus stream, but I'm not 100% on that. Hopefully that answered the question, kind of. And if I misunderstood something in there, please help me out, correct me, and I will try again. More questions? Okay. We're still here for a minute. I have some questions, so if you think of anything, drop them in there. Now we will go through our questions that we had ahead of time. Okay, please correct me if I'm wrong. For an NC to show oil temp, you would need to add an oil temp sensor. Absolutely correct. There is no oil temp sensor in this car to start off with. Again, this gauge is capable of it if you add an external sensor to it. It's super easy, especially with the new one, but that does have to happen. You can't just pull it off the OBD2 stream. Can you explain how to add different add-on sensors, sandwich plate, etc.? So it's gonna vary based on your car, mostly based on what you want. If you want coolant temp on an NA, because again, this will work on an NA or NB, but realistically only with external sensors. It's not gonna pull anything useful, certainly not enough to warrant the cost out of the stock OBD2 stream. So don't get it for OBD2 use on an NA or NB, but it's fantastic for OBD2 use on NCs and NDs. Side note on that one, I believe the bank's website says that this works great on 2009 and up, 2013 and up, something like that. It does work on all NCs, 2006 and up. We have verified that ourselves, so it does work that way. So different add-on sensors, it depends on what you're gonna do. You can do a sandwich plate on the oil filter to get oil temp and pressure. Make sure you have enough room for that first. From a fitment standpoint, the NC, the oil filter, is close-ish to the subframe, so you can probably get away with it, but if you have an extended oil filter and a sandwich plate, it probably won't fit. So just kind of pay attention, do a little bit of research there. If you need coolant temp, you can do a hose splice. You can drill and tap the intercooler to put, air temp or pressure into one of the tanks. If you have one of our intercoolers with a cast end tank, if it's sheet metal, you might have to weld something on. So there's stuff like that, but the short version is with a little bit of fab skills, yeah, you can put all sorts of different sensors on. This is a good one. Can we use this with the upcoming analog race dash you are building? Yes, stay tuned for that one. I'm not gonna provide an ETA, but it is still in process, I will say that. you can use it with it, and it is pretty much separate. So the analog race dash and the exact functionality is still a little bit TBD on that one. But the analog race dash is going to be kind of an LED, just a light representation of what's going on. This is going to give you specific numbers. So the race dash, where they might overlap a little bit is the race dash and this could provide a warning for a specific parameter. Outside of that, they're pretty much going to be separate things because the analog race dash, is designed for NAs and NBs only, is designed to replace the stock cluster or the stock gauge backing, supplement. Thank you, that's a better way of putting it. Supplement the stock gauge cluster. So it, generally speaking, isn't going to add more functionality to it. Sorry, more data to it, let me put it that way. Whereas this is a lot of more data. Speaking of, we do have a handful of videos on that analog race dash. If you are confused and intrigued, check out our YouTube channel and look at the videos we have on there. It is a very cool project. Can you explain each of the readings, what they do, and why they are important? No, we might be here for hours. They are all important. You have your air-fuel ratio, you have your coolant temp, you have your intake air temp, ignition timing advance. I mean, there are a lot of different things in here, and they all have parameters that they need to stay within, and sometimes those parameters will vary. I mean, they'll definitely vary based on the conditions, but sometimes they'll vary based on the car and what you have, and that is a topic for another video. The short version is it can pull a lot out of it, and it will tell you when it has exceeded a value that you have set. So you need to say, this is as high as I want for the coolant temp, and then it will tell you when you have done that. It'll make it big and obvious when you have done that. Okay, is it plug and play? Yep, it is as easy as it gets. The complexity goes up a little bit with the external sensors. It's not too bad. It kind of varies depending on what exactly you're doing. Excuse me. But yeah, for just OBDII stuff, man, it is as easy as it gets. Does FM offer solutions for monitoring coolant and oil temp pressure with this? Coolant, yes, right here, easy peasy. I will also say, for the oil pressure question, coolant is different. So the coolant temp will give you an actual number out of this because there is a real coolant temp sensor on there. It's basically just dumbed down for the gauge cluster. So you can get real data out of that. Excuse me. Oil temp and pressure, no, we don't have any packages for that. Banks does have a bunch of sensors that drop straight into this. Again, new version, they connect directly to it. Old version, you need one of these guys, which I suppose I could demonstrate this. You can piggyback, if I can get this thing apart. Okay, maybe this is a bad demonstration for a live video, but trust me, these come apart. So you just piggyback them all. How does the iDash compare to other multi-gauges? I cannot answer that question very well. I have not used many other multi-gauges. The ones that I have are not even close. Usually they're clumsy. Sometimes it's a big screen, which is better for visibility, but worse for packaging. Sometimes the processor is slow, so it takes a while to do a different thing. So the iDash works very, very well in a very convenient, tidy package. I don't have a ton of experience with other similar gauges to speak to those, but this is the best that I've used by a significant margin. Okay, does this work with all Miatas or just NCs and NDs? Again, OBDII-wise, only NCs and NDs. External sensor-wise, if you want to add that stuff, all Miatas. What else can it do? I hope I went through that list when we were going through this screen. If not, I can't remember the other things that they do. Do we have any more questions? None. Okay. Well, there you go. Banks iDash, summary, awesome, OBD2, tons of flexibility and expansion for external sensors. New one coming out that is better in all of the ways, particularly because you can add eventually external sensors, plug them directly into the gauge without having to purchase the piggyback module. And if you don't need the data logging capability and you don't need a faster processor and better screen and all that kind of stuff, the old ones are a good bit less expensive than the new ones. So pick one of these up before they're gone. Okay, that is it. Now, as always, if you like this, give us a thumbs up. If you want more of this, subscribe. We do the live video every week. And if you have questions, if you have a different solution, if you've used an iDash and it was amazing, or if it wasn't, drop a comment. Let us know. And as always, we will be back next week, so we will see you then.